Team, welcome back. Today we sit down with Mr. Benny Price. He is a COO of RTS Global, one of the leading education companies in the space of coaching and personal training. This guy is a genius when it comes to exercise mechanics and knowing how to get the most out of an exercise. So if you're into weight training, you've been doing this for a long time and you're looking to level up your knowledge and skill set, you are going to love this episode. Benny Price, welcome to the Process Podcast, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Benny, I first met you, how many months ago was it now? Month and a half ago, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
We were both in Bali at the Techno Gym event. You were there as a participant. I was there as a speaker. And very quickly, I think we were rooming from across each other.
Hmm.
And word kept on getting thrown around amongst the other presenters and the Techno Gym staff who had organized the whole event, saying, "Oh, have you met Benny? Benny's like he's doing some really amazing work with RTS." And I was like, "I haven't even heard of RTS. I haven't heard of Benny." So obviously, do what everyone does these days: jump on the Instagram straight away, try to do a bit of research on this guy. Oh shit, this guy's doing some amazing stuff. And then, we had some great conversations. And as soon as I met you then, I thought, okay, this is a guy I got to get on the podcast. You're someone who's very knowledgeable in your field. You care very deeply and passionately about some very specific things. And I think before I continue, let's talk about what those things are. So Benny, like in your own words, however you want to explain it, who are you and what do you do?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a personal trainer. In a prior career, I was a mechanical engineer. And what I was unaware of when I made the switch is that in a lot of ways, they are almost the same thing. And I spent probably 8 years blissfully unaware of. And there was a point where I was doing both at the same time, where I was kind of like a part-time PT in the evenings and weekends, and I hadn't connected the dots. And at one stage along that process of being a personal trainer, quite a bored stage to be honest, I was coaching people and bored and frustrated, right? Because if there wasn't really much of a problem, I wasn't really sure what I was looking for. And then if there was a problem, I wasn't really sure of how to go about solving it other than just like trying random things I'd seen on a course I took the previous week. So yeah, I had no idea about the sort of parallels and overlay between the two. But then I took an education course called RTS. And when I did that, sort of, yeah, the proverbial Pandora's box was opened and suddenly was able to connect the dots. And off the back of, like, I guess, how easy it is for me to connect the dots with my background, I got asked to come on board and start sort of training to be an instructor. And then I was meant to be an instructor here where I was based in Malaysia. And then that kind of started proliferating into other regions. And then fast forward to 2025, which is about 6 years after I took that course. And yeah, I also run operations for RTS in all markets outside of the US, the UK, and Brazil.
Okay. I think the first question is what and who is RTS?
So RTS is its foundations are from the oldest personal training certification on the planet, which is NASM. So the guys who set up NASM in 1989, or the guys that helped build the sort of foundational syllabus for that, NASM then got sold in 96. And at the time, they were trying to expand the biomechanics portion, which was their main influence on the thing. And actually the main thing that NASM was known for back then. And they were trying to expand that, and there wasn't really scope for that in the plans, right? They were trying to make it a sort of surface level generalized CPT and not something that was days and days of just looking at, how you do one rep of something. So the RTS guys sort of left and did their own thing. It is driven and founded from a sort of intellectual property perspective by a man named Tom Purvis. And his right-hand man who, on a solo basis until I kind of came along and joined the gang, was delivering it sort of across at this stage 74 countries around the world was a guy called Dr. Mark Slavin. He's the one that sort of brought me under his wing and got me involved in the gang. But yes, it is fundamentally focused on not how many reps we're going to do or how often we're going to do them or what intensity we're going to do them. And we don't teach some of the other components, like we don't do anything about nutrition. Don't ask me how many calories there are in a burger. But it is all just about the mechanics of exercise in all forms. We're modality agnostic. And then how do we take our understanding of that and use it to customize exercise for people in a way that delivers as valuable and exceptional experience as possible for people who have decided to invest in having their exercise personalized?
Okay. So you're PTing, you're
Yeah.
in the industry, you're feeling a little frustrated, and then you do this course, and suddenly, like, and I know that feeling, by the way, because I've had that on a number of courses, you know, where it's just like the
Mhm.
sudden connecting the dots, and it's like, oh shit, this all makes sense. What was it on that first RTS course that just blew your mind and made you connected all those dots for you?
half an hour in, half an hour in, and someone, Slavin, the presenter, said talk. And it's one of these really weird things, right? Where you get these like in movies when the stuff goes dragging back or something, and you're like, oh my god, I'm in a past life, and suddenly I'm on the back deck of a shipping vessel trying to decide what leverage I need in order to weld something in place. And it's one of these weird things where worlds collide. And bearing in mind, I did engineering not because I really liked it that much. I did it because I was good at it. Right? It was one of those things where you're going, what does my skill set lend to making good money, seeming like I'm clever, whatever it means in this world, right? So I'm just like, okay, I'm good. I'm good at these things. I like how things work. But then you get into the engineering world, and you're not inventing cool things, right? You're genuinely welding little angles to a deck to make sure something that weighs a lot doesn't fall over. Like it's not particularly sort of stimulating or creative in any way. And so that's why I kind of got disillusioned by oil and gas construction and left that stuff. But I still really like, I don't know what TV shows other people watched when they were growing up, but I was Mythbusters. I was all of the kind of invention programs. I was all the ones where they show you how they've taken like an old classic car and like cut it apart and put it back together. And like that was all I was watching as a teenager on telly. And so like that's always remained with me, just like how things work and how to make them work better. And then that's what I've been trying to do, man, in as a personal trainer. I've always been quite rehab focused because I would have loved to have been a professional athlete, but do not even I'm not even close to having the talent for it. Like a constant source of like mental frustration is knowing what I'd like to do in a moment and not having any of the tools to put those together. And so that, and then I'm so brittle. Like my two sports growing up were rugby and kickboxing. And man, I get broken every time. So I was constantly in this process of like, okay, how do I recover to go and be shit at this thing again? And that's kind of what put me in this like rehab focused realm. I think a lot of us that are trainers
Yeah.
do it based on like our experience, right? If someone was a good athlete, then they help other athletes become great athletes. If someone was a bad one that got broken easily, they go and help those people. If they were someone that lost a bunch of weight as part of their journey, then they go and become, you know, weight loss specialists to go and hand over that baton and give other people that same experience that they found so rewarding, right? So that was the thing for me. And then if you're in rehab, you're in problem solving, and if you're in problem solving, then you're going, like, am I just meant to like suction cup the back of your calf or something, and that's meant to fix it? But then how do I really gauge what I'm doing here and what is the basis of this? And everything felt very fluffy. I think as part of being an engineer, I want things in black and white, man. I can't. It's why I never went anywhere near nutrition. Nutrition is insane to me. The fact that the thought that what we understand about something can just be changing on a daily basis as people run other experiments. The thought that you could be like, oh, I take X of this and I put it in someone, and theoretically it's meant to go down this pathway and create this thing, but nothing happened. That like my autistic brain cannot deal with that. Like I need to know what I've done and exactly what the outcome is going to be from that. And that's what getting taught mechanics in exercise did for me, because it's not, no one's about to run a study next week and find that F does not equal MA. Like that's not about to happen. And everything with mechanics is, it's a certain science. What the outcomes are going to be, no one can promise you, right? You it's wild that we ever promise anyone any kind of result, because we could do things with sound logic and a really consistent and objective approach, but we have no guarantee that anyone's going to build any muscle or get any better or whatever outcome they were looking for. So that's what I really liked about mechanics, man. That's the itch it scratched for me, is having an objective lens to look through things at and know that what I'm doing aligns with a thought process and a set of like rules that exist in this world. And yeah, there's the fun bit that not everyone's body has like rules. In fact, most bodies rip them all apart and go, there aren't any. But certainly with with our job as trainers, right, which is applying force to anatomy in whatever strategic means we decide to do so. That's all we're ever doing with prescribing exercise. We're applying force to anatomy. At least our job, the application of force, has rules to it, and they're not in question. And then I was like, okay, I can breathe now. Like this all makes sense to me and doesn't feel wildly and slightly intimidatingly unknown.
Is that because, if I'm hearing this correctly, the focus became less about the outcome, which I think a lot of personal trainers feel an obligation that they have to deliver on and make a promise because they feel that that's what is ultimately going to attract people to come to them, right? That I can achieve Y. And for you, it basically put a lot of emphasis onto the process of like, well, at least I've got sound systems here that make sense, that can't be argued, and it's almost took the pressure off you having to deliver a certain outcome. Is that, am I in the right lines here?
I think that's certainly a component of it for sure. Yeah, is that there was there was a confidence that came from going, look, I'm not even just using a protocol here,
Hmm.
right? I'm not going, oh, this was the protocol I've been given and this is the one I'm delivering you, because even that's got that I wouldn't be confident at all about that, because how many other protocols are there out there that people have dreamt up? So it was more that like, look, I've identified like the thing it gave me, the thing that working for them I try to do is it provides an objective perspective on all of the variables in exercise. And it's like, look, I know what all of these are now. There's like I might be missing one, but actually or I might be missing a factor in what's creating the situation, but I'm certainly aware of all of the variables. And whether or not I can appropriately identify them in the scenario is another matter. Whether I can control them when I'm trying to problem solve is another matter. But
Yeah.
at least I know that what I'm doing here is is logical. And if we don't get anything out of it, well, yeah, I've probably missed something. Because I'm human, and that's the process of thinking. And I'm less likely to miss something if I'm constantly questioning whether I've done so. But otherwise, yeah, there's I found it more. There was definitely more confidence from it, but it was way more stimulating as well,
Mm.
because man, I wanted to be a good trainer so bad back when, like, I still do, right? But at the time, I was really not one, and I was aware of it, was very aware of it, and primarily because of the stuff that I wasn't able to fix, right? Like the number of times you go, yeah, well, I learned this last week, so I'm just going to do this, and then it didn't do anything. I'm like, okay, that no, and you've got options there. You go, oh, it's the problem with the person, like it's them, right? There's something wrong with them, or they didn't try hard enough. And then the other side of it is going, yeah, I've definitely missed something here, man.
Yeah.
And so that's, yeah, I think the other thing as well is like you want to when you want to be as good a trainer as I did, and I wasn't really okay with just like, yeah, count some reps, take a paycheck, that kind of thing. Like I was looking so hard at people working out, I didn't know what I was looking for.
Mm.
I didn't have a yeah, I didn't have a guide to be like, okay, well, I'm looking for relationships between this thing and that thing. It was just watching people working out and trying to see if it looked like the YouTube video I watched, I guess.
Yeah. No, I can relate. Okay, I think I
Yeah.
think I think what we need to break down here, Benny, is like biomechanics. What do we mean by that? We haven't really defined that just yet.
I mean, if you looked it up in a textbook, you get uh the functions of things on the planet or something like that. Like it's a very general term. I mean, I think a lot of the time we in the industry think of it relative to like how humans work out, but technically it's like how ducks swallow and how like mosquitoes can walk on water and random shit like that, right? So it's that's why actually at RTS we've termed it exercise mechanics
Yeah.
because it's like, okay, how do we take that stuff and apply it to what we do in the gym? And the way that we look at mechanics is essentially this well, the way we look at exercise is a tug of war, right? You've got this tug of war between external force application and internal force production. And any form of exercise is internal force production. Yeah, you've got, I don't know, powerlifting where you do a lot of it for one rep, but even these things that we would term cardio and everything somewhere in between. I think I saw you talking in a story recently about this like goal dependent thing where you could be somewhere in between, right? You could be somewhere in between and looking at something that requires some cardio effects and also some strength things. And all we're doing is grading levels of internal force production from muscles get tired first to cardio respiratory vascular systems get tired first, right? So that's the only difference in how we look at strength versus cardio. And somewhere in between, or with all of them, you will see muscle adaptation to a certain degree. The question is, does it end up making them look bigger or not? So the way we look at biomechanics is, it's funny when someone attends an RTS course and they're like, oh, what am I going to learn here? I'll be like, literally relationships between forces and axes. But then that's not the best sell I've found. So if we think about it in terms of like biomechanics, it's if we start seeing things for as force, right? And we go, okay, external force application, internal force production. That is how at RTS we define exercise. Well, what's producing force? It's muscles. And then the reason why this thing like flexes my elbow is because that force pulls towards this point here. And so if I'm going, right, but then the reason why this thing would be a lateral raise in this position, and the reason why this face pull thing isn't rear delts is because I've affected orientation between things. And so if I start seeing these things as lines of force that produce results around axes, then I start seeing that actually understanding the map of this thing. Because otherwise we learn anatomy and be like, yeah, okay, it's this person stood in a textbook like this, like some of the things on the wall behind me. And that's not how my clients do exercise. So that's confusing. Maybe they've got a couple that they do in that position. But am I just learning these origins and insertions and stuff to sound clever? Am I just learning the names of muscles so that I can sound clever and know Latin words for things? Or is it that the map tells me how when I affect joint positions, it affects what's got leverage where? But then also, if you look at often like university biomechanics, it's very focused on this stuff. And sometimes not appropriately focused on how positions affect what muscles do. But a lot of the time they miss the big picture, which we try and put a lot of focus on at RTS because it is so lacking elsewhere, which is the external force application. Because that is the thing that defines exercise, right? Like I can do this and it can look like a chest press or it can look like a row, but the resistance here is my arm.
Mm.
This is an isometric lateral raise, right? So that's the perspective that we try and provide trainers with is we almost get babied in the industry by getting told to focus on movement. And movement is nowhere near as relevant as resistance. I can move in this function, but it is not what is doing the work or getting tired or receiving stimulus. It's the stuff that is carrying the load. the direction that I'm not moving in is the one that is receiving stimulus, is having to produce that internal force production. So we try and give trainers.
Team, I want to quickly interrupt this episode to give a little shout out to our sponsors today, Well Spent. This little journal has made such a massive, profound impact on my life since I started using it. When I started using it, I actually didn't know that it was backed by neuroscience, but now it totally makes sense. This has brought a ton of gratitude to my life. It keeps me on track and focused on the things I need to do day to day, and brings a lot of context as to how each day fits within the greater week and the greater month. So if you, like me, really care about trying to be a high performer and want to do everything you can to make that happen, I cannot recommend this journal enough. Use our discount code, The Process, to grab yours today.
That lens of biomechanics, exercise mechanics, whatever we do. And if we understand that, we understand stimulus. And the whole point of stimulus is all the adaptations that supposedly are the reasons why people go to the gym, and customizing that so that we can not just achieve stimulus in the right places, but also take into account the fact that like there's also joints between all these muscles and bones. And if someone's coming to us for good quality of life, they probably don't want us to beat the crap out of those things in the process.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to like younger Benny, right?
Oh,
You've just done this course, and it's like your mind's a bit blown now, uh,
yeah.
because the mechanical engineer in you is like, this totally makes sense, and I can apply this to the thing that I'm now doing, which is personal training.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the things? Because we just talked about a lot of high level stuff there, but I want to talk like let's like boil this down to like simple understanding of it. You go back to your clients after,
Yes.
unlocking all this new knowledge that suddenly makes sense to you, and how do things now look different? Like from what you've learned at RTS and the way you're
Mm-hmm.
now thinking about um, training, coaching, helping people. What actually looks different now compared to, Benny pre RTS and learning about exercise mechanics with the new knowledge you have? Like, what starts to look different?
I mean, first of all, I'm on the brink of tears half the time because I've just had this existential crisis that we get it quite often on the course where coaches are like, my whole life's been a lie.
Yeah.
And then, and like, that's the initial like self thing, right? As you're going, man, my whole life's been a lie. The next stage in this like horrible process is I've wasted a lot of people's money, right? That was, so I'm stood there and like, I'm going, how do I get my head around this side of things? And then it's a matter of, for me, I was like really, really torn by this. Like I proper beat myself up about it because I had the tools. Do you know what I mean? Like I I'd done the mechanical engineering stuff. Like I had all the thought processes there, and I just hadn't been using them. So that was really hard. But the thing that looked really different in the session was that it stopped being a matter of me taking exercises off a shelf almost and giving them to people. It's like, what are we going to do next? We're going to do one of these. We're going to do we're going to do some, I don't know, barbell chest presses or something, or even cable chest presses, even something slightly off the beaten track. But okay, we're going to do some of these. And how do I set them up? I set them up as I think they're meant to look based on the way that I think this exercise is meant to be done.
Mm.
And so I'm essentially taking people and pushing them into these boxes of exercise. And sometimes they don't fit, right? In fact, most of the time, if they're really being picky, they don't fit. Why so many people feel like they can't feel the right thing during an exercise, and you're going, but the same person felt that during theirs.
Or I
What's the
feel
difference?
great when I do that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is the leading reason for prescription of exercise, I'd say, in our industry. So that was the perspective shift was from shoving people into exercise to actually designing exercise for them.
Yeah.
And
Can I-
then,
No,
sorry, yeah, the other, I'd say the other thing was just then the precision with which I was watching what they did, their execution of it, and the precision with which I was looking at applying force, as opposed to it being like, oh, you're doing this thing, so it must be hitting these things. It's like, how have I aligned and arranged you relative to those things?
yeah.
And so, and it's just mad, man. It just goes from being this like watching people do stuff to lines in space. We talk about it like taking the red pill in the Matrix, where you can't unsee it.
Yeah. So can I share like my story with it? So
Please.
I haven't done RTS, but I 100% know if I knew you guys, at the time where I really needed this information, I 100% would have done your courses. Anyway, I ended up stumbling down. I think you and I are very similar in a sense that like we're both broken athletes, and that was a big driving force behind what I wanted to do and pay forward to the people that I was working with, right? So I always gravitated towards rehab-based clients as well because, I've experienced it. I know what it's like to be in pain, and I know how frustrating it is. And I think I have some cool tools. I think I can help you more than maybe the other coach.
Hmm.
I resonate with that a lot. But in my own rehabilitation, from 7 reconstructions of my body, the prescription is always the same. Do external rotation exercises with the TheraBand once you dislocate your shoulder. I was also told, like, never press over your head because that's going to make it's going to affect your glenohumeral joint and you're going to have more dislocations. So there's all these things thrown at me. And when I would ask the questions, because, when you have one injury, you don't know how to deal with it. You don't know how to navigate it, right? So you trust a coach or someone who's going to tell you what to do, you're going to do it. But then when that same thing happens again and then again and again, which is what happened with me, 4 shoulder reconstructions,
Okay.
yeah, you start asking a question. It's like, okay, hang on, I did this last time and I'm back here in the same situation I was a year ago pre-operation. So maybe the things that I'm doing are not the right things. Maybe there's something better that can be helping me fix this situation I'm in, right? So that was like my backstory with it. So I think back to early days of Coastal Fitness, as the owner, and we've always done professional development. Every Tuesday for the last 16 years, the team gets together, and typically at the start, I would just be educating everything I'm learning from all the courses that I'm doing. We're passing it on to clients. And I remember some of our protocols. It was like, how do you progress someone on a dumbbell chest press? Always start on a high incline because it's weaker, and then over time progress to a flat bench. That was like the order of progression, right? It was also things like when we're doing pulling exercises, always start with a cable first because it's easier, and then you're going to progress to a barbell. So the order of progression goes cable, dumbbell, barbell. I would also think about split squats. And it was like, okay, level one, everyone starts on the floor on a static split squat. Then we progress to a forward lunge. Then we progress to a reverse lunge. Then we progress to Bulgarian split squat. So I had like these rules that we had created that as a team we followed as our means of progression, just because we thought is from simple to challenging, or from like non-complex to highly complex. When I ended up, learning about biomechanics, it threw out all those rules. It was like, okay, the knee over toe split squat is not a better or a worse split squat than a Bulgarian split squat. It's just different, right? And there's lots of different things. It's not just that one is more quad biased and one is more glute biased. One has, hip extension of the back leg and aggressive dorsiflexion of the front leg. Like, is that appropriate to clients? So, and then I started thinking about the chest press example, and it was like, okay, an incline press is just working very different fibers of the chest, the delts, the triceps. Works for some people. It does not work for me. Every time I do an incline press, it feels not great. I don't feel a pump in my chest. And so for me, I'm like that, it just completely changed 12 years, 10 years of program design for me. And I think I kind of, explained it to my team, when I'm relaying this stuff. It's like, this is just the next layer, right? So it's like we've been stuck on this outer layer of the onion of just
Mm.
basic program design, which has delivered actually kind of decent results. Like we've changed a lot of lives, we've transformed a lot of bodies, we've gotten a lot of people out of pain. But now there's layers to this thing. And now, if you think the results that you were creating were great based on just that split squat progression, which might have just gotten lucky and it might have worked really well for one person. But now, like, let's actually question these exercises and really ask ourselves, like, what are we challenging here? And then you start learning about length and shorten positions, you start learning about moment arms, and it's just like, holy shit, there's so much more to this. And I think what blew my mind with all this stuff, it was that had maybe gotten to a point where I was like, I feel like I've just beaten the game already. I'm like, exercise is easy. Like, it's not that difficult. It's like you do a push, you do a pull. Oh, someone needs more pulling, you just do 2 pull exercises and 1 push exercise. And it almost like I had almost burnt myself out because I just felt like there was nowhere else to progress. And then
Mm.
learning about this stuff was like this endless progression and this game, this puzzle of like problem solving that has now become I think about this stuff every single day with every program that I write, and it's just made program design so much more interesting, so much more challenging. And yeah, so I wanted to share that story because that's the way that I kind of look at it. I think thinking about your RTS example and how it changed your life as a coach, that's kind of like my story and how it's changed my life, my life as a coach.
Yeah, it's a relatively like common story where like I mean, especially if I look at the number of people on a course with us, right? No one's there having not achieved results. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to afford to go on the course, right? There's like it's very standard, and especially with people that like care and we're paying attention to detail, and you can still solve problems with other stuff, right? You'd be like, oh, that didn't work. Let's try this. Like there's good reasons, and I think there's also a lot of merit to, especially in a position like yourself where you run a team, to have structures in place, right? Like if not all of us as trainers with the education that we get given at like a entry level have the tools to be going through this like diagnosis and objective analysis process with clients and like problem solving. And a lot of us, the reason I think that a lot of CPTs give us such protocol based templates to training is that they're going, well, otherwise, how are we going to sell personal training to people if we feel lost with what to do with them on the first session?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of merit and a lot of place for systems like the ones that you had in place. And the reason like it helps get the ball moving so quickly. And if you've got people that can kind of think around things as well, then they'll usually find a way to make that work. And I think it's a very productive way of running a team and making sure that things tick over and there's not constant and people aren't constantly getting different experiences as your clients,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's really important, but it's this. I had the same thing, man. It's like I was genuinely so bored with PT that I was trying to like run other fitness related businesses and do all these things, and it was just this thing that I kind of did, and then you go exercise like programming because in exercise programming you're designing a program, right? But then the way we get told it, and I guess what might have been the case for you 10 years ago was that it was like the that's the only design element here. And I don't know, I feel like tell me if this feels kind of similar to you, but when you don't think about actually designing the exercises, and bearing in mind I've taken your exercise programming like short course that we did in Bali, and I told you afterwards how awesome I thought it was, right? Because what it feels like a lot of the time when you haven't got such a strong systematic process that you've put in place to help people program well and to help people keep in mind all the components of programming, right? The variables and making sure that they don't get lost in just writing down what they did last week in the gym. It feels like creative writing sometimes,
Yeah.
right? It's just like, okay, hold on a second though. Like, well, I just thought it'd be good to put that after that. But then that next layer to me that you were talking about is really okay. But then in this selection of exercises that I've put up here, I've also got a design element to each of the individual exercises themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's just, I mean, I think that's what, growing up, I never thought I was a creative guy. And I've never had like this creative, I was like, I can't draw a horse. If you ask me to draw a horse, like I'm useless at art, design tech was terrible. And I feel like the only I was actually just speaking to my wife about this the other day. The only creative outlet I feel like I really have in my life is actual programming. And
Mm,
there is like this flow state that every time I sit down and write a program, I mean, bear in mind, I don't know how many programs I've written, and I'm 16, 17 years into this industry and career, and I still have probably 6 hours, 5, 6 hours every week. I'm just sitting writing programs, and I love it because it's like it's never ending. There is no right or wrong. There's no like tick the box. Everything can be right. Everything can be wrong.
hmm
Everything can deliver results. There's nothing, and others can't. And so, yeah, I've just found this massive creative outlet in it. Um, that you just never there is no end goal. There is no like you never accomplish the level. Um, okay, here's one thing, Benny. I'm going to change it up a little bit. So, in planning this podcast, one
Yeah.
of the things that you're super passionate about and the things that I think you do an amazing job on Instagram talking about, I thought straight away, okay, this is going to be a challenge to be able to take some of these concepts that you articulate through video and speech very well. Like you're sitting there, you're looking at the cams, of a fixed machine in a gym, and you're talking about, resistance profiles, you're talking about moment arms. I'm like, okay, if Benny only has words, voice and audio to explain this stuff, how is he going to do it? So what I want to talk about now is we've talked about exercise mechanics. We've talked about, like there's layers to this. We're going into the weeds a little bit on exercise selection here. How
Mm.
do we actually like give our listeners like how can we actually explain these concepts so they can actually understand and maybe start to look at their own training and the things that they're doing and start to think about it on a deeper level? Is there like an example of an exercise that like you always use as like the one that people seem to just understand quicker?
I'm trying to think about, earlier when you asked me the question about what changed the most with what I did in the gym straight afterwards. Um, and then I know the kind of the theme for this series or this season is kind of strength related, hypertrophy, building muscle related. And so there's an element of that I think could come together for people pretty well here. And that's the relationship between strength and resistance, right? There's, that tug of war I was talking about earlier. The thing is that the players on either side of the tug of war, the tuggers, if you will, are they're not equally strong in all positions, right? We've got the fact that resistance isn't the same all the time, even though the dumbbell, right? The whatever it is, this, don't ask me why I have a tape measure this big by my desk, but if this tape measure weighs X amount and I've just got it by my side, it doesn't suddenly weigh anymore when I hold it further away from me, right? But relative to me, relative to the experience I'm having, and relative to the force that the people on the other side of the tug of war are having to produce, things have changed dramatically. And there's this potential correlation there's a definite correlation between efficiency of effort in the gym and understanding that stuff. Because the kind of funky thing is that when my arm's by my side, these muscles are longest. And our muscles are kind of like elastic bands where they're stronger when they're longer and they're less good at producing force when they're shorter. So we've feels kind of strange explaining this to you but I know we're
No, this is good. Okay,
talking about
so
this in general.
I'm going to pause you, Benny. Okay, so
Yeah,
just for the listeners listening, so we're imagining we've got a dumbbell by our side, right? And so let's say the delts, like our shoulder muscles, to simplify it, are like lengthened, stretched. And what you're saying, Benny, is that if I was to lift my arm out the side, I think people would probably think of this as like a dumbbell lateral raise. What's happening is
exactly.
those delt fibers are now getting shorter as the muscle is contracting. What you're saying is that when the muscle gets shorter, the tissue is actually we can elicit less strength in that position versus when the muscle was longer. What you're also saying is that we got a 5 kg dumbbell by our side. And then as we lift it up to the side, the exercise is feeling harder, but it's still 5 kilograms in our hands. And the question is like, why? Why is that happening?
Yeah,
Have I got that right?
yeah. And it's the combination of two things that aren't always the case in exercise, but this is like the most dramatic example you could come up with, really, because it is getting heavier in terms of what it's demanding from us. It's because it's gained leverage, right? That resistance is further away from our joint. This is the torque thing that I said was the word that came out within the first half an hour of me attending the course, and I was like, hold on a second, what is this? What is this sorcery that I know so well but I didn't realize applied? So you've got this distance thing that is actually the key determining factor to how much torque is being required at the joint. And then if more torque is required from the external stuff, more force must be required from the internal stuff. But I put myself in a position where those internal force producers are least good at producing force. Those lateral deltoids and the fibers of everything that's on that side of the axis. That's another perspective that we try and give trainers it's not always just about a muscle. It's everything that's on the correct side of an axis to have an influence. But those things are in their least strong position. So
Okay.
I've
So hang on.
I've got
I'm
Mhm.
gonna be the non-scientist that's gonna try and like whittle this down.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're saying here, Benny, is that with that dumbbell lateral raise that we've been using as an example,
Hmm.
and because as the arm, raises up higher, the amount of
Yes.
force placed on the shoulder is actually at its highest relative, relative to what I've done so far, right? So if my dumbbell is level with my shoulder, there is more force at the shoulder required to hold that there. Am I
Yes.
okay? Yes, but the muscle is also shorter in this position than when it was longer. So those two things aren't matching up in a great. Not to say it's wrong, but what we have here is that the load is at its greatest at the top when the muscle is also at its shoulders when it's weakest.
Yes.
Is there anything wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that at all. And here's the funny thing about building muscle, right? I I can't even imagine how many bodybuilders built massive delts doing that exercise for decades,
Yeah.
right? Certainly until people started making reels with ticks and crosses next to them. It was the done thing. And it was how some of the best shoulders in history have ever been built. So there's nothing wrong with it. The only time at which you could say there's something wrong with it is whether it was an appropriate or efficient use of someone's time, right? If someone's paying you 1 to 2,000 Hong Kong dollars an hour to use 2 hours of their week as efficiently as possible to create an appropriate amount of stimulus, then we might question its suitability.
Mm.
Because as a result of that relationship, we know that this exercise is actually only really difficult here
At the top.
at the top. Yeah. And when you get down to the bottom, sorry, I forget the
Yeah.
requirement for everything to be very audio. At the bottom, you could keep as soon as you can no longer lift a weight with control to the top position, you could do plenty more. In fact, you could probably keep doing progressively lower and lower and lower rep range, like rep
Range.
ROMs,
Yeah.
yeah, ranges of motion for the same number of reps at least over again.
So just to pause, what we're saying here is that for most people, they're doing a lateral raise. Once they can no longer get to top, for them, they just stop the exercise and
Yeah.
done. But
Well, most people do one of two things. They either stop the exercise or start swinging it.
hmm,
Because what they're doing is they're using inertial effects
to get to that same point, yeah.
to get to that same point. They're using that strength that they've got in the bottom, where it's weak, to give the mass in their hand momentum so that it's not actually as difficult at the top.
Yeah.
Now, that's also what bodybuilders have done for years. And when you look at this efficiency and this relationship between strength and resistance, all of these bodybuilders, the guys that built massive delts were very rarely using the 5 kilos and doing them with control up into the top position. What they do is they go and get the 25s and they'd orchestrate this very well managed process of bang out of the bottom position. And if we think about it, moving with a greater force with the same mass means moving with a greater acceleration with the same mass must mean they're producing more force. So they use the fact that they're strong in the bottom position and use speed to create more requirements from their deltoids in that bottom position, and then use this momentum that is being given to require less of them in the top position when they're weak. So this poor matching of strength and resistance can be overcome by using momentum, inertial effects, and manipulation of speed or tempo, as some people might even refer to it. Though it's kind of hard to think about that in terms of tempo because there's such an inconsistent speed to
Yeah.
each portion of the rep.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can use these things to overcome it.
Okay.
Now,
Pause.
yeah, pause. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of people in the working out world, whether they're bodybuilders or just regular gym goers, or even CrossFitters. Now, CrossFit is maybe different because there's a lot of inertia and momentum used in a lot of movements because, like, Olympic lifting, for example. But the concept of like momentum and swinging is bad.
Well, here's the thing, right? There's a big difference. The big difference between CrossFitters and what we're talking about at the moment, which is personal training clients.
Yeah.
And they might be one that's trying to be the other, right? But if we just looked at someone who's coming to the gym for beneficial internal outcomes versus CrossFitters, those are two very different goals, right? Because if external performance is the goal, you actually want every rep to be as easy as possible.
Yes.
so that you can do as many of them as possible as quickly as possible.
with as
That's
little,
an external
with as
performance.
little energy as possible.
Exactly. And the more there's this, like, in order for people to get their heads around that, they need to be able to differentiate two different versions of efficiency. Because the efficiency we're talking about when it comes to creating stimulus is
Mm.
I want as much stimulus as possible from as little as possible
Yeah.
throughout as much of the rep as possible, which is the polar opposite from what any kind of athlete, whether it's CrossFit or high rocks or rugby or anything that they could be doing. But CrossFit, high rocks, and powerlifting are the ones that come to mind because they use the same tools that we seem to use in
Yeah.
the gym.
Yeah.
But that's the big difference here in terms of what matters to us when we're thinking about using momentum.
Okay. I love that distinction. That distinction of efficiency. I haven't heard that before. I will 100% be stealing that. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So
I don't know if I've said it before, but there you go.
no, it's great. Okay, so let's continue on with this argument. So not argument, but this breaking down and
Mm,
explanation of what we're talking about here. So we've been using this lateral raise. We've been talking about like the use of momentum and why that can actually be a powerful tool to actually basically like ask more of the muscle in that exercise.
yeah,
Continue. Do you remember your train of thought?
I do. So it's a really good hack, right? This, okay, well, hold on a second. I've got to do the exercise this way with this. The thing is, we say, oh, I've got to do it this way with this tool. The main thing is I've got to do it this way with this direction of resistance. So how do I manipulate that? I can use acceleration. Now, the problem is if we only thought about things in terms of muscles, which again could be the lens that we're looking through if we're going, but all these jacked dudes built huge delts by doing this. So if we were just looking at it in terms of that, cool, I guess. I mean, I'm not 100% convinced at the precision with which we're achieving that. Like, when you're working with people, you're trying to take them on this progression process and you're trying to make sure that you're, especially if they're like competitive level to the point where they care about the size of their delts, you're trying to push them to like what is the cusp of what they're tolerant of on a constant basis when you're training them. It's like, how do I really know what happened here? Because if the speed wasn't consistent, because no one can keep that speed perfectly consistent, how do I know what force you were actually producing if the A component of F equals MA is all over the place? So we can question the precision of the actual stimulus. But the big thing here, the one of the very RTS centric thought processes and lenses, which we think by and large the industry misses, other than the people that are like scaremongers and constantly fearful of it, is joints.
Yes.
Because if I can hold a 5 kilo and achieve a certain amount of stimulus, but I hold a 25, and when I throw it, there's first of all, there's the forces involved in trying to throw it. Second of all, you throw something, you've got to catch it, right? If I've given this thing X amount of momentum, and I know what my shoulder is tolerant of, being able to produce force here. So let's say, right, let's come up with some theoretical random numbers. Maybe that helps people. So in the bottom position, this thing weighs 25 in terms of its mass. Now, if I move it hard, I could be having to produce like 50 kilos of force against this thing to
And
get that thing.
we're still talking about the lateral raise here. So
Yes.
people envision this dumbbell movement out the side of your body. Continue.
And I'm not obsessed with lateral raises. I don't hate them.
Yeah, this is some
They're a
example.
common, easy example
Yeah.
that I might use. But so we throw it, and that means that, to move something slowly that weighed 25 kilos, I might only have to put 26 or 27 kilos of force into it, right? If I wanted to lift it.
Yeah.
But to move it quickly, I've got to put a lot more than that, potentially even double. So let's say I've had to put 50 into it. Now, by the time it gets to the top position, maybe I'm capable of 50 at the bottom. By the time it gets to the top, maybe I'm only capable of 10, maybe 20. But the thing is, if I've thrown a 25 there, and at some point, I know my shoulder is capable of 10 in the top position, but the problem is my shoulder is only capable of producing 10 up there. So, but I've got a 25 in my hand, and at some point that thing is going to come back down.
Mm.
And so I've put a joint in I've put a joint in a position of having to manage increased forces with a strength that it doesn't necessarily have. And this is also just ignoring the fact that, hold on, what if I could change the exercise relationship, right? Between the axes and the joints and the resistance and still be able to use less weight? Because even if I'm not having to catch it, using more weight puts more stress through this stuff. And we've got to bear in mind that it's like so much more weight and stress than we would do in any other facet of life. And I think if we think about it through those lenses and we go, essentially intelligent internal performance related exercise is managing to achieve as much stimulus as possible with as little tax paid in the process, as little stress placed on the joint as possible. And there's a direct correlation between how much load you use and, if I'm going to be pedantic, how much leverage it has and how much stress is placed on joints.
Yes, the joint conversation is just never really talked about.
As if exercise is beneficial in all manners, in all volumes, at all intensity. As if we live in this wonderful world where you can earn stuff without paying tax.
Yeah.
Like everything comes at a cost. And the problem with it is that yes, things come at a cost, right? You tackle a second row, that's often going to come at a cost. And that's a very acute increased application of force, and you'll often feel the cost involved with that. But the problem that we've got with exercise is that that cost only really makes itself known when, I don't know, bone is rubbing against bone.
Yeah.
And you've gone through a lot of the stuff in between that was progressively incurring a cost, but we weren't aware of it. And so we live in this industry where it's like, well, if it doesn't hurt, then it's probably fine. And we cannot make that assumption.
So what is the biggest like takeaway message you want on this topic specifically, the joint?
Yeah.
What's like the biggest takeaway message reminder you want to give people when it comes to thinking about this and the exercises they're choosing, or even how they're thinking about training?
I mean, if it's just most people in the gym,
Yeah.
and we're not talking about people with external performance goals,
Yeah.
right? Because that differentiation between efficiency is also a very clear line in my mind. Like I don't think about like going. Most people do not go to the gym for external outcomes. Almost everyone, like the majority of people, go to the gym for internal outcomes.
Yeah.
And then there's this like select group that I think as personal trainers we get really misguided by, because it's so many of us that might go to the gym for external performance outcomes. But if we're going to the gym for internal performance outcomes, stop throwing the weight. The goal is not to move it from A to B. The line I said on a presentation recently was just that, like, it's so strange the way so much of us go into the gym to achieve internal stimulus, to stimulate muscles, and then walk around a gym trying to stimulate machines.
Yes.
And that's not why we're here, right? It's about how have I managed to contract this thing from point A to point B, and how have I managed to apply an appropriate, lots of layers to what that might mean, resistance to that, requirement of that throughout its range.
It's just no fun for the ego though.
It's really not. It's really not, unless your ego is focused on how jacked and capable I'm going to be when I'm 65.
Which is, I think, what everyone feels deep down, but that's not sexy on social media, you know?
It's not, and it doesn't make you feel good bunging the 82 on the stack around at 35. But if we really think that, like, if anyone took a second to think, like, why, if I can't master this resistance, like, why am I so obsessed with applying more to it?
Mm.
Because this is the thing, right, with all these variables and all this very sure science about the external force application element of things, is that and these variables, and realizing that progression is not the only form of progression, is not moving the pin down the stack or walking along the dumbbell rack. There's so many ways to progress the internal stimulus. And it's one of the reasons I can't stand the term progressive overload, because it's this term that would be given by the industry that for so many people simplifies their perspective on exercise.
Mm.
Because they think progression means load,
More weight. Yeah.
yeah, more weight, and it facilitates that simplistic way of thinking, which does very few of us any favors.
Yeah. I very much got stuck in, pigeonholed into thinking that was progression as well, for many, many years. And I think back to the old days of writing programs for clients, especially, from day one, I was doing remote programming. So, writing out 6 to 8 week programs for people all across the world. And I would always just write an 8 week cycle off the bat. And what do you think progressive overload looked like? Week one, 12 reps. Week two, 10 reps. Week three, 8 reps. I'm just progressing. And like the only stipulation in this program is load must increase as repetitions decrease. And for years that was just like the only way I looked at progressive overload. And obviously, the things that would happen with that would be people would just run out of options after 3 weeks. They've maxed out all their exercises, so now they're in a sticky zone where it's like, well, I still have to increase the load, but I can't
More
really.
reps? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is an option, but that wasn't an option that I used. It was like,
Okay.
no, 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 no. You just got it's only add more load.
Okay. Wow. Wow. You were very consistent with
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
application. Okay, fair.
But also, it was the easy way to program, right? Because that way I didn't have to take a week by week client centric approach where I'm looking at their results and
Mm,
changing it. It was like, nope, you're sorted for 8 weeks. I'll see you in 2 months, and we'll write your next program.
mm,
And then yeah, all sorts of problems happen there. Clients unable to progress beyond it. Now compensation is starting to happen. The exercise initial intention is now doing all sorts of other things because people just figuring out a way to get the load from A to B, right? And they'll do any means to do that. Again, I'm also saying this is just my clients. This was me as
yeah.
well. I'm just projecting all my shit onto the clients I was coaching. So yeah, can very much resonate with all that, Benny. Benny, I want to ask a question because I know this is something we chatted about offline,
Okay.
but I want to chat about like the world of research in like
Yeah.
hypertrophy and strength training and your thoughts and opinions on it.
Uh, You wanted to ask me this because you thought it'd be amusing to get me in trouble, did you?
No,
Yeah.
I'm genuinely interested to hear your stance on it.
Okay. So I should also caveat this, right, with not claiming that a lot of what I talk about is my own original opinions and stances that I've conjured up while laying awake at night or anything. Like the majority of the perspectives that I have are essentially regurgitated and repackaged from Tom Purvis. So I do need to make sure that I'm not
All you're
claiming.
saying, if anyone's gonna hate what you're about to say, just reach out to Tom.
Well, that to be fair, yeah. Though I'm willing to take all the heat, to be
Yeah,
fair, for
nice.
this, because I think potentially um I might have an even more an even more outlandish stance on it because I do not on a weekly basis, on an annual basis, there is not one instance where I use one piece of research to coach my clients, particularly to solve a single problem for them, right? You can maybe look for research in terms of being like, I don't know, how many sets per week you need to do, or like what positions to train into build more muscle. But honestly, like my perspective, and I guess this really comes from working in the education space now, is I'm really focused on how to deliver as much value as possible as a professional. The reason I care so much about that is if I can teach people that, then what we deliver is as valuable as possible, and more people will want to pay more to do it, right?
Yeah.
But the premise of that to me is I do not see anything that shows a tangible amount of increased gains from anything that they've ever found in like resistance training studies outside of like, yeah, if you increase volume, you get more muscle. So we needed research for someone to tell us that if you do more, you get more up until you don't, right?
Yeah.
And that might be remotely useful if we had a clue where that point was for any of our clients from this research. But we don't. So all we know from all this research that's been done on how much training you should do, how many sets per week you should do, is that everyone gets some stuff, quite a lot of stuff to begin with, and then they get less incrementally less stuff, but still more stuff the more of it you do, until the point at which they don't really get much more, and then until the point at which things actually start to become detrimental.
Yeah.
That is the total outcome of all of the studies on volume, is that some more is good until it isn't. Like whoop-de fucking do, man. it is mind-boggling to me the amount of time and energy that gets wasted on this stuff, not just in like doing it. Like if people want to piss around and do studies, that are sure, if that's what you enjoy. The thing that's mind-boggling is the amount of time and energy we waste studying it as personal trainers,
Mm.
and thinking that that is the bedrock of education in our space, because it does not allow us to provide any value to anyone. What allows us to provide as much value as possible to people is, I mean, that might allow us to provide some value to someone who is obsessed with having slightly bigger muscles. I mean, those people, certainly in my world, are almost irrelevant. Like, I love working with competitive level bodybuilders, but even then, it's not like, oh, I think you should do another 2 or 3 sets. It's like, oh, hold on a second. So this thing kind of hurts when you do it, and you need to be able to keep beating the shit out of this tissue, but you're getting this joint issue, which is always what it is, right? It's always a joint thing. So how can I redesign exercise to alleviate that problem? Or how can I redesign your session so that the right stuff is, I don't know what word you want to use, prepared. I try and stay away from activated, because like, what, as if it was just asleep? But the right stuff is prepared for the stuff you're about to do, because that's got multiple layers to what you could consider that to be. And then, so then you've got this like joint problem solving thing with competitive bodybuilding. Equally, you've got like this muscle is not really seeing much stimulus. How can we redesign the exercise to, I don't know, align resistance better with the stuff that you're really trying to focus on? How can we redesign the exercise so that you can't use the other stuff, which is the tendency you've got, which is why this thing gets to take a passenger seat the whole time? So I love working with high level bodybuilders, but anything to do with what research might tell me about them is really quite boring.
Yeah, Benny,
And
can you give me an example? Like, give me an example of like one of these, something that you've experienced, maybe like a story or working with one of these clients, where there's a joint issue, things aren't getting stimulated in the way they want it, and you've like redesigned something to still achieve the stimulus without smashing up joints.
so that you kind of come at this from two different angles, or I think that you can. I'm probably missing a third and a fourth angle. But the question is like, okay, first of all, is it just the joint itself going through certain ranges with certain loads? And is it certain loads in certain ranges, right?
Yeah.
Earlier, when I was talking about this relationship between strength and resistance and how that can affect building muscle and efficiency, I kind of didn't end up finishing the thought on that, which is like, try and maybe make stuff heavy where I'm strong and light where I'm weak, so that as
Yes.
much of the rep becomes as difficult as possible. And
Okay.
that,
Pause then. Let's finish off that chapter, because you're right,
yeah,
we didn't finish off. So we're going to stick with the lateral raise, because that's been the theme of this podcast so far. So
yeah,
tell me, how do we do that? How do we match up what you just talked about on the lateral raise to maybe get more out of the exercise versus just a dumbbell out the side?
yeah. And so when we say get more out, I think we could also be really specific in terms of achieve more stimulus
Yeah.
per rep,
A rep. Yeah.
right? Because we could still get just as buggered by the end of it.
Yeah.
But how many sets is it going to take? How many reps is it going to take? What am I going to have to put this joint through in the process of getting there?
Mhm.
If I can get the same level of buggeredness from X number of reps and sets of something with X amount of resistance, as opposed to X plus a bunch because I've had a less efficient means of creating that stimulus, then this one would hopefully be kinder to the joint. Because
Yes.
I don't care about the muscle thing, really. People have shown that you can build the muscle for centuries with using a less efficient means of creating stimulus, right? So that's not actually really super important. It's like, what am I having to do and what am I having to pay for in the process? And how can I use my time as efficiently as possible, right? The people that were building incredible delts probably had nothing else to do with their day. Plenty of our clients are like, here's a lot of money because I've got lots of other things to do.
Yeah.
So if I'm trying to match that, I'm going, well, if I want to get more out of the bottom position, which is where we establish that I'm strongest, I need that to be where the resistance is heaviest.
Yeah.
And then I need the resistance to get lighter as I go into the top position. Two really easy options that come to mind. First of all, I could use a cable at like my hip height,
Yeah.
right? Or at the position where, if you imagine I've got my arm down below me and the cable would be at like 90 degrees at the beginning. Because if the cable starts at 90 or even slightly less than 90, as I lift my arm upwards, that cable's angle relative to my arm and its distance from my shoulder axis is going to reduce.
Yeah.
So it's going to get lighter. Yeah, I mean, there's other factors. The weight of my enormous arms is going to come into play. But in this scenario, that's so that the people that are only listening can imagine that I've got enormous arms. But in this scenario, then the resistance, the total torque requirement at my shoulder and the total force requirement from those abductors of mine, those lateral deltoids, has reduced as they've gotten weaker. And so when I get to the end of this set, I'm unlikely to be able to do a bunch of half reps in that lower range because I've sufficiently torched every bit appropriately relative to its capability.
Yeah.
Another option, because that was the option where, and again, this is why I come back to RTS and mechanics being about understanding relationships between the axes and forces. Because in this scenario, what I've done is I've redirected the force. So I've used a cable stack to manipulate gravity with a pulley system that means that force is no longer downwards, it's now back towards the stack.
Yeah.
The other option is I can manipulate the person, right? And so I could take them from doing a standing up dumbbell lateral raise and lie them on their side on a bench, probably at like maybe 30 degrees, and have them do a single arm lateral raise. And then the efficiency thing comes a bit funky, right? Because you're like, well, is it more efficient because I had to do one arm at a time? But it's a convoluted question that is exactly why we are not saying it's better.
Yeah.
All we're saying is that it's likely to produce more stimulus than per rep than the standing, seated, whatever, dumbbell.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you do that. And suddenly, if you imagine when you're lying down, that dumbbell is further away from your shoulder horizontally, which is this moment arm thing that we learn about. And then as you lift your arm above you, it now gets closer to you, closer to being stacked directly vertically above, which just like when it was directly vertically below, means that it's creating very small torque requirement at the glenohumeral joint.
Yeah. Okay. What baffles me, right,
Yep.
is when I started learning about all this stuff and I start following, on social media, guys like Coach Kasim and people in this space. And, now I follow all you guys as well. So I got even more of this shit coming out.
Okay.
But and I'd love to ask your opinion on this and why you think this exists. There's a lot of people, I think, predominantly in the coaching, but in the bodybuilding space, like maybe just older generations. I'm talking like guys typically in their maybe late 30s to 50s who've been doing this for a long time, who seem to have like a lot of resistance against the concepts that you're talking about, right? These ideas that, like, let's take that lateral raise, for example. I see, people commenting being like, this is bullshit, it doesn't work, it's a waste of time, you're focusing on the wrong stuff. And for me, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, for sure.
And then for me, I'm thinking, this just makes so much sense. Like, this was like an amazing discovery for me that's like meant that, my exercise prescription for myself and my clients is going to be way more efficient. I don't have to do 25 sets of everything. I'm going to do one, maybe two, and I get even more of a stimulus and I feel like I've achieved way more. I just don't understand what people have against it. So can you like just shine some light on maybe the standpoint that they're coming from that maybe I'm not seeing?
I can't speak for them, but it's certainly a thing that I've given a lot of thought to, right? Because it's a constant resistance to the thing that I do.
Yeah.
And I think I might hypothesize that the cause of this in our industry is that from a lot of people's perspective of results, you don't need this stuff to get better results. A lot of these people that might have been coaching and training for 30 something years will have built great physiques and helped other people build great physiques multiple times, dozens, maybe even hundreds of times in their careers. The thing that they don't consider is that in order for that to have been the case, if their system was particularly crude, was the person just had to be tolerant enough of it.
Yeah.
And so the people that sit in that category are not the broken athletes, right? They're not the people that have to solve problems around things. They're the highly tolerant people that are built of steel, and they've been able to get through this life just like bunging stuff around. And because the requirement for building muscle is intensity and consistency, right? That's it. The requirement for healthy joints is very different. But the requirement for building muscle is consistency and intensity. And if you've got strong enough joints, or maybe joints that just haven't yet told you how pissed off they are because you haven't reached the end of the tether, then it's very easy to live in this deluded world that this stuff is not that important. But these people have never delivered high value problem solving experiences to people.
Mm.
And that's the problem, is that if you live in a certain world, it's very easy to be blind to certain information because you don't need it. On courses that we run, it's very rarely the you know the jacked bulldog that is in the room that's going, oh yeah, I'm here because I'm hungry for information to solve problems, because they've never had some.
Yeah.
And that's, and I think the other problem you've got, I was thinking about this the other day because I was trying to put these thoughts together, is that it actually, that dynamic sometimes works against us in this portion sect of the industry, right? In that we'll often have a lot of people on our courses that don't look like the people that, like they don't look like bodybuilders necessarily, right? They don't look like people that are high performance jacked athletes, because they're the people that potentially couldn't have become one because they weren't tolerant to everything that's involved in the process. Yeah, I don't know, dude. You're a pretty jacked ex athlete. I don't think you
Just me.
count. Yeah. Okay. Um, yeah, I'm talking about people with about 25 kilos less muscle mass than you.
Okay.
But you know what I mean? And the people that will often really love and embrace this stuff, if they haven't beat the crap out of themselves trying to tackle people, is the people that were low tolerance and as a result really appreciated this stuff and started really trying to tell everyone how great it is. And then you've got the meatheads going, oh, it's always the pencil necks talking about this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, because they were the ones that had a problem to solve in the first place. And so they came looking for it and they've embraced it the most. And so you end up with this like relatively tricky dynamic. But that's, I think, the fact that you can do so much with not actually knowing anything in this industry is one of the key contributing factors.
Yeah. I 100% agree with all that. And
Cool.
I see a lot of parallels, in the CrossFit space as well.
Yeah.
And it's why the marketing material of all the biggest coaching organizations are the freaks. Or it doesn't really matter what you get them to do, they're going to turn into, Greek Adonises, doing they can sit in a row and do 2K every day and study their biceps and their lats, and their erectors are huge.
Yeah.
And
Through cardio.
yeah, exactly. And it goes against everything, you get taught. And obviously those people become the poster boys and the poster girls of the organizations. And ultimately, when you look at, what I've seen in the space of CrossFit has been, immense amounts of volume unnecessarily, but out of 5,000 people doing the program, the 10 people who rise to the top can handle it, but the consequences, the 4,000, 990 people who develop a lot of issues in the process of it. And I think that's always been, since coming into the CrossFit space, which is, where I've existed for the last 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
that's something I've always felt very strongly on, which is, I'm not willing to sacrifice, short-term health of the athletes that I serve. And if that means I have less people standing on the podium at the CrossFit Games, I'm totally at peace with that.
Mm.
But I also understand that that might not put my organization, amongst the top 5 in the world because I haven't produced results. But what I'm much more proud of is the fact that, we have members who've been doing, what's supposed to be a very dangerous activity, and they're doing it. They're starting their 11th year now, and they're in
Mm.
their 40s. They're healthy. They're still getting stronger. They feel energized. They sleep well. That's what matters a lot more to me. So I think what's been my challenge, and my continual challenge is like, how can I make this sustainable in the long term, not beat people up when everyone says it does, and have people, be able to do this thing that they love, because a lot of people do love it, they just can't keep on doing it. These
Yeah.
people love challenging their body to do cool things. They've been through transformations, they've like built a lot of muscle, they've done hit, and they're just like, I kind of want what's the next challenge, and it doesn't, that hadn't have to be one exclusively without health. You can also marry those two things up, but there's lots of things that go into this.
But I think what's really interesting there is that the other difference to this argument is that you have a very different definition of results. But your results is how many people that wouldn't have been able to do this sport that is one of these like weirdly health beneficial sports if you can do it right, right? Like if
Yeah.
everything else is just like other sports are generally sort of purely cardiovascular benefits, but then this one you actually get a bunch of strength out of it as well. And you have to pay a price to doing that if you don't do it so well. But if you can do it right, then you get most of the good stuff with it. And so your definition of results is how many people can do this and still lead great lives and do this for their whole life, right? And the person that goes, oh, you're wasting time with all that namby pamby sciencey stuff, and you could have a conversation. They'll go, well, show me how many people you got results for, and you could show them your list of athletes on not as many podiums, and they could be like, well, look at all the people that I did, and the problem is that there's never another image, right, or another lineup of all the people that got broken trying to
Yeah.
run those really simple high intensity systems.
Yeah.
And you see the same thing in the physique space or in the performance space or whatever. Is it's like, yeah, but how many people did you discard as being unwilling to work hard enough or not tough enough when the reality was that your coaching just wasn't intelligent enough?
Yeah. And again, like the pain point, the driving force for me is because I was that guy. I
Yeah.
was that guy that did all the programs, the general templates, and I tried to follow what the top dogs were doing. And I just got, you know, beat down, broken, and spat out. And that was all my own fault. No one's fault. Like, I just thought that was the best way. Anyway, Benny, I knew I would love this conversation with you. And I think there's a lot more to unpack. And I think a second episode in the future is going to be very much necessary. But I wanted to close just with two questions. My first
Yeah.
question is, what does what does the future hold for you? Like, are you a goal orientated person? Do you set 1, 3, 5, 10-year goals? Are you a go with the flow guy? And do you know what the future looks like for Benny?
Uh, yeah, I think, I mean, it's very much at the moment focused on sort of growing the footprint and the accessibility and the influence of RTS's content within the markets. So like I spend the next 4 weeks on a tour around Europe, sort of teaching in 5 different countries and doing speaking things and Australia as well, where we've not traditionally had much presence. So our Asia stuff is relatively well established, but we need to put more into Europe and Australia. So that's a big focus of mine for the next probably 3 years. Might even involve me moving in order to make that a little bit smoother a process. I've also just launched a little project called the Gym Equipment Design Awards, which is essentially where I've assembled a council of sort of biomechanics specialists that don't have any affiliation to any equipment company, never have had, and cannot have one as their council member. And we're putting together across 12 categories, the three best in class pieces of equipment from a biomechanics perspective. Don't care what color they are, don't care, how pretty they are, but also not just from a biomechanics, from a usability perspective, how practical is their footprint. If it can do all the things in the world, but if it's 3 times the size of anything else, then it's going to lose some marks.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're doing that, which we hope will shine a light on like who's doing great stuff in the equipment world, because I think there's a lot of appetite in the industry for having good kit, and that sector has grown a lot. I think also the number of manufacturers out there has grown a lot, and the amount of stuff on the market. Because some people have got like thousands of SKUs, so it's kind of, I think, a bit bewildering for people trying to set up gyms and choose what to put in them. So that's sort of a project that it's about to have its first issue in 8 weeks' time, and I'm looking for that to take on a life of its own, hopefully in the next few years. But yeah, that's where things lie at the moment in terms of the goals, is really just growing those two things. I do a lot of sort of mentoring for personal trainers online and online sort of coaching and problem solving for people, but that's like a professional thing, right? I just want to keep getting better at those things. The teaching side of things with either one-to-one or in groups. But I feel like that's a skill set that I've generally, as long as I'm reflective enough with it, then it comes with reps.
Yeah.
And that's generally been the case.
Love it. Benny, okay, our closing tradition on the podcast is one mantra or quote that resonates with you right now?
Hmm. I would say I- just being a man of your word, or woman of your word. But that's the biggest thing for me. I think it's been the biggest thing for a long time. Um, I've had a not so great week where two pretty important people have not kept their word on something, and I don't know how they went to sleep because like I couldn't like that's the one thing I've always tried to stick by to like the best of my abilities. Is yeah to be a person of thy word.
Love it. Benny, this was great. I really appreciate your time this morning, sharing all your wisdom, all your insights. You're very, very good at what you do. And yeah, I'm very excited to see this next chapter of yours unfold. Also, with your own little side project, I would love to, how can one buy a subscription to this? Or is this like a printed thing? Is this online? Okay, awesome. Well, I will 100% be purchasing that when it comes out.
Look forward to it. Likewise on all fronts, mate. Thanks for giving me a platform to rant on, and I've really enjoyed having a chat today.
Awesome. Benny, where can people find out more about you, get in contact with you?
I mean, it really depends on what you do. Most of my sort of trainer and gym specific content is on Instagram at the exercise educator. And then if you own a business and like thinking about that side of things and the dynamics of running teams, being in the industry, education, that side of stuff, then you'll probably prefer my LinkedIn content, which is Benny Price.
Love it. Benny, thank you very much. Good luck on your travels and your next chapter. And I look forward to having you back on the podcast at some time in the future.
Thanks, sir. Thanks for having me.
Before we say goodbye, here's one crazy statistic for you. Did you know that almost 40% of people who listen to the show don't actually subscribe to it? Now, I didn't think that was a big deal until I actually learned about the power of hitting subscribe. For you, the listener, you get to stay up to date when we drop episodes on a weekly basis. But for us as a podcast, it really helps our visibility and helps us attract great brands and great listeners to help grow this podcast. So if you enjoyed this episode or you're a big fan of the show, please do us a massive favor and hit subscribe. Thank you so much.